the main goal that we want to achieve through this particular session is for me to share my journey with you, and hopefully there's certain bits and pieces where I've made, clearly I've made mistakes along the way. And if I share those mistakes, hopefully that can, help everyone minimize the chance of them making a mistake as well. And hopefully a couple of things I did along the process could actually help everyone here in terms of, it's not a hack, but more so help you, I guess, fast track what it is that you're trying to do. Getting into the journey itself, I mean, today, where I think it's important to start from where we are today, then look at where we started from. Today, I guess the software development arm, Techne, we are a seven-figure business, and we've developed a lot of different successful platforms on the market, specializing in app and software development. And through operating this particular business, it's given me a lot of opportunities to meet other founders, and we have also take part in working with other founders in terms of sweat equity, putting money in there, and other ways of getting involved. So where the business is today, I'd say it's definitely classified as successful. But where it started, it was started on the back of a massive fail. So 2017, I had my own app idea. It was actually called Fab, short for fabulous. It's imagine a Uber, but it's not an Uber. It's not a cab, but it's a fab. So the whole idea was, we recruited all the top 1% of Uber drivers that would come and drive for us, and we would charge a little bit more than Uber, but we're providing a premium service. So that was the idea, because back in 2015, I noticed that the quality of Uber rides and cars was dramatically dropping. So came up with this idea. At the time, I met a few different people from different car clubs, and one of the persons I met was the CIO of KPMG, and super knowledgeable guy. We had multiple workshops, and eventually he became a member of the advisory board. So we did a lot of planning, and found a developer. One of the first thing we did was we looked for a developer, got the developer to do the design. But the first mistake that we made was we did not separate the whole design and discovery phase to the development phase. So in other words, we negotiated how much this particular rideshare app was going to cost to build without actually having all the details confirmed. So, as you can imagine, then, we've discovered, right, we need this feature, need that feature, and quickly we discovered none of the features were, included. Everything was a, optional extra. So I think the first lesson that I learned is deliverables, milestones is super important. And having, when negotiating a contract with a developer or anyone who's going to be providing you with service, the most important thing is actually the deliverables. So that was the first mistake that I made. We negotiated, how to pay extras for things that I thought was included. Went and had it built. And the second mistake that I made was we put a lot of trust on people, and we did not really, when we were paying them, we did not really look at the tech stack. So tech stack, or commonly known as software architecture, it's actually one of the most important, part of a build. Imagine if we're building a house, software architecture would be what grade of concrete we're using, how high a ceiling is, and how much scope we have to build additional levels on top on a later date. So normally how I would determine the most feasible software architecture would be working backwards, understanding the product, and working based on what does the product actually need and what we actually need to support from a software architecture perspective. So because we had already agreed on the price without all these details, once the actual platform got built, they charged us, the developers charged us good money. What they charged us and what they promised was enterprise level software architecture, but what we actually received, it was minimum viable product. If I said it was minimum viable product, it was probably a bit more generous. And we launched, and the whole thing fell on its head. So that was a not only an embarrassing time in my life, but one of the most stressful times in my life. But before we talk about how we pivoted, I wanted to quickly cover how we actually recruited drivers, which is highly relevant because a lot of different founders and their platforms is aimed at utilizing third-party service providers, two-way marketplaces. A lot of founders work with the hospitality industry or specific industry. So what I did for the first startup was the rideshare industry, and the primary service providers are Uber drivers. And I quickly found out one of the best ways to hire or select Uber drivers. Day one, I didn't know what to do, so I actually took a few short trips with Uber. Then it was not bad. You jump in your car, you talk to them, but I quickly realized the cost side of things to recruit all these drivers was quite high. So what I realized was, right, there's different Facebook groups for drivers, and I joined the Facebook group, and I started posting about my startup. I quickly got kicked out of the group because they don't like people advertising. I think this is one lesson that I learned. You need to learn how to handle rejections. Obviously, I was rejected by the group admin or the group moderators because they don't like me posting about, because it was a Uber group, they don't like me to post about a different startup. So rather than just giving up or do the same thing in another group, I reached out to the group admins, and I explained to them, hey guys, look, I'm just trying to create a startup. I understand that what I did may be against what you want to do. If that is the case, I'm happy to look at this as an advertising opportunity and pay you for advertising. One of the things I wanted to make sure that they understand is I'm not here for freebies. Everyone likes to take something. So if it takes what it takes, I'm happy to pay for advertising fees. So the conversation with one of the admins quickly escalated, and I was like, hey, you know what? Let's catch up for a coffee. The guy came up to catch up for a coffee, and I asked him straight up. I'm like, look, if I bought the group from you, how much is it going to be? At the time, he gave me an astronomical number, it was a couple of $1,000s, and I said to him, hey, this is the average cost for Facebook marketing. With what you're asking for, it's going to cost me less to build my own group, but why don't we settle for a lower number? So so I bought the Facebook group from that particular admin, and I was able to advertise whatever I wanted to, but I retained that particular administrator as a moderator. So he was helping me moderate on my payroll, and that kind of opened the door into advertising of direct recruitment of drivers. The next thing that we did was we looked at, okay, how do we... So there's this other gentleman who's one of my mentors, and he actually said to me, with a startup, we always need to look at how to leverage someone else's database. or someone else's resources. So putting on that particular hat, I looked at, okay, how do I grow the driver base without me advertising? And how do I grow the driver base? How do I grow the driver base, of quality? So what we came up with was I before I share that part. So when I was advertising the business, a lot of the drivers actually pushed back, more rejections. They were like, "Hey, Gordon, how much how much commission are you charging us?" And at the time, Uber was charging drivers 25%. So I said, "We're charging you 25%." Drivers were like, "Okay, well, if you're charging the same, why would we come and drive for you?" So this is the point where, it's not, if you want to create something that's going to make you money, it's not about competing who's going to be charging the least amount of money, because you would never make money that way. So I thought, okay, what we need to do is this. I created, I found the company that made the Amex cards, the Centurium, the platinum cards in Guangdong province in China. Reach out to the manufacturer, and I had aluminium cards, invitation cards made. They were all laser engraved or had their own, invitation codes and things like that. It's like an ultra premium thing, that were invitation cards. I gave a set number of card to individual drivers, and each driver, they only had an allocation of a certain number of card. And so on the driver recruitment part of it, we only accepted drivers who were 4.9 stars in Uber or more and had a vehicle that were 3 years or newer. So what I did was, to get passengers, was I gave these invitation cards. I remember, I think roughly 20 or 30 cards at the time, to each individual driver. And I said to them, right, we're charging everybody 25% commission. But if you give out a card to a passenger, because you only have 20, you can't just give it to anyone as spam. You have to identify the best type of passengers, polite, clean, in your opinion, it's the ultimate type of passenger. Give one to them. What happens is, once you invite that particular passenger to the platform, that passenger is assigned to you under your name. If that passenger rides with any other drivers, out of their 25% commission, 5% is going to you. So that basically, we turned a rejection from a driver wanting to pay less commission into something positive. So that was one of the things that we did. So that, by the time we went from start of the design process to launch, that was within about 6-month period. We had over 400 drivers, and we had all these customers pre-signed up and all that. But long story short, because of obviously the mistakes that I made, the startup fell on its face. So when it fell on its face, the decision or the decision I need to make at the time was, okay, do I just basically put this thing in the bin and just go back to what I was doing? Or do I try to, salvage this? And one of the things that, so growing up, mum has always been in business. And one of the things that she taught me along the way is, a lot of the times, if you lost money during your process of starting a business, if you give up at that point, then you've lost money. If you're able to turn it around, then really what you've lost is tuition that you've paid. So I thought, okay, you know what? This amount of money I've lost, it was about 550,000 Australian dollars. So I thought, okay, if I lost 550,000 Australian dollars, that was, software development, advertising. Back then, Google Maps API, we had to buy it in advance. It was like 55,000 USD. Converted to Australian dollars plus GST was about 90,000 Australian dollars for 2 million, tokens for Google Maps. There was all this advertising, and it was just a lot of money. And I thought, okay, well, if I lost 550,000, it was a hard pill to swallow. But if I pivoted and this thing became a success, then really it was an expensive lesson. So of course I, decided that we needed to assess the problem and pivot. So before we go into the pivoting part of it, I wanted to quickly share with you how I raised the first $300,000. So raising the first $300,000, at that time I've never raised money in my life, and I didn't have access to Hyper. I didn't have access to VCs, and there's no AI. So one of the ways that one of the ways that I came up with was my immediate circle, because at the time I had quite a few friends, and I created an Excel spreadsheet of everybody I know, whether they're a friend, whether they're an acquaintance, whether they're a family, basically everybody's name, a list of names. Then I basically put in just, of course, I don't know how much money they have in their bank account, but I'm looking, okay, what sort of cars do they drive? Do they own their own house? And I roughly add it all up, assuming that there's no loans attached to it. I put a number next to each of the names, so that kind of gives me a overview of how much asset or how rich or poor they are. Then the next column was a bit of a controversial column. It's a rating between 1 to 3. 1 being an absolute tight ass, 2 being normal, and 3 being super generous. So I gave everybody a rating, and I did a bit of a sorting, and the first name that came up was a friend of mine, and their family are property developers, and she's unemployed, and pretty loaded. So yeah, I gave her a call, and I'm like, hey, Vicky, I got this idea that I want to share with you. So I explained what the idea was. Again, one of the things I think that is a takeaway from this is, if you want to raise money, to start the conversation by saying, hey, you know what? Let's have a conversation because I want to raise money from you. It's a lot harder, because when you do that, in my opinion, people put up a wall because no one wants to give you their money. But when you want to share your idea with them, it's more like, hey, I want your input. And when they gave you and put in that input, it's almost inadvertently adding value to your idea. But for them, it feels like, oh, I just added value into this thing that could be really big. They kind of feel a little bit of ownership in it as well. So that's what I did. I'm like, hey, let me share this idea with you. What do you think? If you were a passenger, would you, use the app? And the conversation quickly escalated to, can I invest? And of course, from my side is, yeah, absolutely. And and I was able to raise that $300,000 within like 48 hours. So yeah, that was how I got the first investor. Fast tracking to the point where this whole thing fell on its face, because obviously the tech behind it was not up to scratch, and it couldn't actually take the load, and the whole thing broke. So obviously I decided, right, we need to keep going. So I assembled my own team. I hired my own people, because at that point I just had no trust for anybody. Hired my own team. That was that was really hard. By pure luck, backend developer was super reliable. iOS developer was super reliable. Android developer had to swap the person out because they weren't as good as they said there was. But I rebuilt the app, and by the time I rebuilt the app, Taxify came from Europe, Ola came from India, Didi came from China. Everyone were doing free rides, $50 credits, first 5 rides for free, and one of the things. So one of one of my favorite books that I read was actually Sun Tzu Out of War. And I feel like it's highly relevant for business use as well. So one of the things is you never fight an uphill battle. You always lure your enemies to even ground. So I thought, okay, in this context, if I go and compete with them on if I'm doing free rides and all that, then I'm really fighting an uphill battle. What is an even ground? It's something that they do not do. What do they not do that I'm not doing? And I realized, right, it's parcels deliveries that they're not doing. So we quickly modified the app to do parcel deliveries. That took off, and started doing a lot of parcel deliveries. And one of the things I realized was with parcel deliveries, the margin is just really thin, and we're delivering, often things that's of value. So one of the things I experienced was, we're getting people whining, people complaining, and I'm looking at someone's complaint, and I'm like, dude, I'm like making like $2 off you, like you're taking up half an hour of my time to resolve this thing that's not even the thing. And I just thought, well, it's not what I want to do, because it's just too much effort for very little gain. So then it was pivoting again, because at this point, Uber started doing parcels deliveries, and I thought, okay, how do I stay ahead of the curve, and how do I pivot to solve this particular problem? So we got rid of the passenger or the customer side of the interface and turned it into API driven and B2B. One of the main and first customers that we had was the Fairfield and Moonee Ponds Business Association. So we opened up an API endpoint to them. They adapted, what we, adapted our platform to theirs. So all of their deliveries, anything that's on demand, came through via an API call. So now I didn't have to touch it. And whilst all that was happening, I had this team of developers that I was bleeding money. I just had to, I didn't have enough work for them to work on my own, so I had to find them work. So I quickly realized that there were a lot of people that were in my shoes at the time with broken apps or apps that don't work. So we quickly made a name for ourselves in app rescue services. Essentially, it's fixing other people's apps. And this is where the first time I got involved with another startup, and I got screwed royally. So there's this particular startup, I won't name who, but they were in the rideshare industry as well. And they were in the rideshare taxation space. And so they came to me with a broken app, essentially go, hey, Gordon, can you fix it for us? We looked through the source code, and I openly said to them, guys, this is not something we can fix. It's so broken. If we try to attempt on it, it's putting a Band-Aid on top of a Band-Aid. So the conversation sort of, carried on, and eventually it was decided that they would pay for a portion of the development. I offset a portion, and I get a small percentage in equity, which is what we did. We rebuilt the whole thing. We essentially did the design, rebuilt the whole thing within about 2.5 months. So when we did that, so that particular founder was actually a Hyper founder. And they used a developer out of Europe at the time. We did that. And Sasha, the founder of Hyper, took notice. And that's when we had a conversation towards late 2017. And and then we started partnering with Hyper, and we've been partnering ever since. But going back to that particular story, I can't remember how many percent I got. I think it was like 3% or something. And once we rebuilt the platform got launched, massive sign up, and there was a lot of business going through it. And after about a year, we did a few updates. I've got access. I'm a shareholder. I've got access to the back end. I can see how much business is going through it. And as a shareholder, I wasn't provided with any reports or any profit loss statements. Nothing. It was just no visibility. And I said, guys, how are we doing? Like, can I, I asked for a few things that are typical shareholder would ask. It's always like, Gordon, we'll give it to you, we'll give it to you. After about 2 years, they were like, hey, can we have the source code? I'm like, yeah, of course, it's there. Like you have access to it. And what they did was they turned off the app that we took equity in, and basically got a different developer to, whether it's modifying existing codes or doing something else, but they pretty much did a copy, like improved version of what we had built. And the biggest lesson there was we spent about $40,000 with lawyers. Lawyers couldn't get anything done. We went to ASIC. ASIC was not interested. One of the founders, she was actually CPA. We went to CPA, and CPA is not interested in knowing about it. So really, it goes to show that if you take part in the wrong startup, and if people choose to do the wrong thing, at least in Australia, there's not much you can actually do to protect yourself. So, and that's with shareholders agreement and all the legal documentations in place. So I think picking partners and picking business partners and who you work with is really important, because if people want to screw you, and even if you try to protect yourself, it costs you a lot of money to do that. And whether you get the result you're after putting in the stress, the time, the money, is completely separate, a separate question or separate story. So that was the first time that I got screwed with a partnership. But the first on that's something negative. Then I got screwed over on the second partnership as well. So we, I met this lady, and we built this particular duty-free platform for China, and basically we built it, and we went to raise money, and one of the investors, we went pitch and this and that. When it comes to time for that investor to put money into our company bank account, one of the founders, what she did was she created a separate company that was pretty much identical as our company name, almost exactly identical, and then created a company bank account and all that. And she forwarded the other company's bank account to the investor. So the investor put in just over $1 million Australian dollars. And then she's completely disappeared. So that was the second time we got screwed in the startup scene. And but something positive that we did, or a partnership that worked, was actually in 2020. So 2020, everybody knows it. It was COVID, and for a lot of people, it was quite tough. But we did exceptionally well. And one of the things we did really well was, again, pivoting Fab, the rideshare platform, a little bit. So what happened there was, in 2020, my friends rang me and go, because I was traveling to China and all that, and my friends rang me and they were like, hey, whatever you do, don't come back. There's like a really serious flu. And then we noticed there's COVID breaking out here and there. In March, myself and a friend of mine, we decided to create a grocery deliveries platform in Melbourne. And we built it. We built it in like 2.5 months, just under 3 months. And and then COVID hit. So that particular startup took off, and he actually utilized the driver platform to do all of the deliveries. So that worked out really well. And ever since then, we've been very selective in who we work. Well, when I say who we work with, more like who do we develop something with a bit of sweat equity. But sorry, Julia, any questions so far?
Yes, I've got a few questions. Thanks so much for sharing your story. It's Techne wasn't your first company, and you've learned a lot from those past experiences to bring Techne to where it is today. I've got a couple of questions around Techne. How do you, because these days you work with lots of founders to help them build their products. How do you validate that that was the right business to start? And how do you get your first customers for Techne?
How did I get my first customers for Techne? So that was that was a really tough time, because at the time I didn't actually know what was the right strategy. So what I thought was, okay, before we understand the industry and look, for business, you've got your labor force. So I've got this couple of developers. They've got 8 hours a day. We've got this much output every single week. Really, at the time, what was going through my mind was, how do I maximize their output for the maximum amount of return? And because I had no experience, it was more about trialing different things without really investing a huge amount of time or money into one thing that we did. We trialed different things. So on the internet, we did advertising, and we did advertising for app development. We did it for web development. We even did like SEO, hardware prototyping. Essentially, we cast a really wide net to understand what is the market actually want. Everything that we've casted is something that we can actually do. And we quickly worked out app rescue was what everybody was looking for, because there's just, even today, but back in those days, it was especially a thing. It was just a lot of broken apps. So the first phase of building Techne wasn't, it wasn't really like, how do we be more efficient, or how do I have better processes? It was about, right, we need to get cash flow because it's for survival. So that's how we started, and we decided what to do. And through that, we met Sasha from Hyper, and then everything turned around from there. And look, I'm quite happy to say, look, Techne was on its deathbed. Like, I was struggling to make ends meet. Like, I was losing money every single month, until I met Sasha, and then basically that's how we built Techne. So on the back of Hyper success. Yeah.
No, I really liked what you said about testing a few different things out there to see what exactly people needed. I feel like a lot of the time people have great ideas, but it's only really when you speak to potential customers that you understand how to serve them, basically, how to add value to their lives. So I really like that point. Having a software development company, Techne is great. I've worked with you for the last 2 years. I've been at Hyper, and you've been at Hyper for almost a decade. How do you approach competition in the industry, for example? I think this is really useful to raise, because Hyper works with lots of different founders, and in no industry is there a monopoly unless you're Australia Post. It's like multiple of everything. What's your approach and perspective on competition, and what's your advice for founders?
So there's a couple of parts to that question. I think the first thing that I want to address is, there's always going to be a competition. So there's always going to be someone who can do a better job than us. There's always going to be someone who can do it quicker. There's going to be people who can do it cheaper. So how do you approach this? And the way that to me is, the only way I would approach a project is doing it properly. So, looking at the participants, there's actually quite a few, founders that I currently work with. One of the biggest difference that we between us and others is, before we actually even quote our costs, and this comes from personal experience of getting screwed over, and people just ripping me off, and for me, I would never do that to other people, because I was on the receiving end, so I know what it feels like. And the only way to avoid that is actually understanding all the details prior to entering into a contract. So what I guess the beauty about the Hyper part of the process is, the designs, the prototype, all that gets done. Before I quote on the development part of it, I always spend the necessary amount of time with clients without any fees or any commitments from the clients to go through the actual product itself through the lens of a potential user as well as a developer. And then really understanding, how are we building it? What are we using to build it? And working backwards to understand, right, this is the list of deliverables. Here's the functionalities. With each functionality, here's the different ways that we can build it. With a particular product, certain functionalities, I think we can build it in a really light manner because it doesn't require anything heavy. But certain features will need to build it in a super robust manner because it needs to scale. And by having that interaction and that conversation with the client, we understand, right, here's the product where it is now. That's where it needs to go in the next, whether it's 3, 6, or 12 months. So what are the infrastructure that we need to put in place? And based on that, we work out the engineers that needs to get involved, how much time needs to be put in there, and provide an itemized scope of works. So then that particular contract is fixed price. But the biggest difference is nobody provides lifetime warranty in this industry, and we provide lifetime warranty. So one of the things I said earlier is we're definitely not the cheapest. We're not the cheapest because we spend the right amount of time on the project to a point that we can offer lifetime warranty on this. Okay, and there's no maintenance cost because when you build something properly, there should be nothing to maintain. So that's how we approach this. And I think if I have to summarize it, it's just really doing it properly. Do it once and do it properly. That's the goal. So yeah.
Cool. It sounds like, execution is a big part of standing out, as is having a unique selling proposition or something that differentiates yourself from, other players, which you mentioned, at Techne, you've got lifetime warranty. That's really great. Your story's been really great so far. Just cognizant of time, we've got a few minutes left. I thought I would, end this session by asking you for your top 3 pieces of advice, 3 practical things that you think founders should focus on when they are in their early stages, whether they're still in Accelerate. We've got a few founders on here in the Accelerate process, or even if they are closer to building or have built.
Okay. Cool. So I'm gonna use this opportunity to answer a question from Peter Pasic. So Peter asked the question, so from your experience, what are the biggest mistakes founder made moving from the Accelerate strategy plus validation phase into the build? How do you structure a project and strategies to avoid this? So this is a highly relevant question, and that's one of the things I want to address, as well. The number one biggest mistake is I see founders wanting to build a super app or something that is perfection from a product perspective. This is not just only from me, but you also hear it from people like Jeff Bezos and all these other founders. It's not about how good your product is; it's about distribution. Remember that example I gave you about Fab, that rideshare app I was trying to create. It's not about how good the product is or how cheap it is or what you look like. It's about how did I get the customers? How did I get extra drivers? It's the distribution part of it, right? So I think you shouldn't really try to have every single feature under the sun. It really needs to solve 1, maybe 2 problems. Save your time, save your money, build the product, nice and simple, get it out there, get feedback from the actual market, because your market, your customers, is actually going to tell you what they actually want. Then spend money on that. So whatever you've raised, don't blow it on your first build. Build something that's a true minimum viable product. Go to, have it launched, and then then gather actual feedback from users and build on top of that, because then you're building what people's actually asking for. You're not wasting money. So that's the answer for Peter's question. And that's also one of the things that I wanted to address. Let me just have a question too. How do you determine what to build and what to not build at map stage, and what your framework for getting live fast with accuracy without compromising the foundational stability or future scalability? Okay, cool. So this is a relevant question as well. So when we build anything, we look at software architecture. Software architecture is determined by the product itself, because the software architecture part of it needs to support the product. When we look at a particular product, if you look at a meditation app, we know this is end customer, backend uploading some features. If you look at a dating app, we know it's two sides swiping each other. If you look at an e-commerce platform, we know what's involved in an e-commerce platform. So we've built all these different platforms. When we understand what type of product you're trying to build, we can have a meaningful conversation about, right, where is this particular product going in the next 6 to 12 months? On the back of that, we will be able to recommend you the right sort of software architecture that's going to support the product. And based on that, we can let you know how much it costs, the pros and cons. And depending on your budget, you might say, hey, you know what? From a product perspective, it's good for now. It's scalable enough for the future. There's no technical debt or anything like that. It's all great, but I've got a smaller budget. So then often if that's the case, which is most of the case, we can look at, right, we can still build you, features that you've designed, but maybe certain features that we believe is going to be used less, we can build it in a more, lighter manner. Okay, so that's answering Peter's second question. So then we've got Sion. From Techne's perspective, what are your observations and sentiment on the startup ecosystem in Australia currently versus 5 years and 10 years from now in terms of idea, quality of founders? Okay, so I have to be honest for this particular question. 5 to 10 years, that's a long way away. And honestly, I think if I know, I'll be a very rich man. I honestly don't know, but I can talk about something that's going on currently. I mean, if you look at back in 2024, December, Lovable, which is a vibe coding platform, got launched. That quickly became this, major thing. Everyone started vibe coding around middle of 2025. Other platforms such as Cursor and other bits and pieces came out. That was middle of 2025. As of March of 2026, app stores implemented a policy and they are preventing new vibe coder apps from being listed. So, at the moment, we're going through a phase, almost like an AI evolution sort of phase. So anything could happen. But I think at the moment, smart developers or smart founders are using AI to, be more efficient rather than using AI to replace a specific flow. In the next 5 to 10 years, that's just, I mean, if you look at the last year and a half, so much have happened. Almost every quarter, the cost for AI tokens, large language model tokens, has been halved every single quarter. So in the next 5 to 10 years, anything could happen. That's just the honest feedback. So, yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Gordon. We are a little bit over, so people have to drop off. Please, don't feel like you need to stay. We've really appreciated everyone who's joined the call. I do have one question that I want to ask to kind of close this. Oh, yes. Kiara's just asked a question. Gordon's kind of indirectly answered it. I feel like when you answered, Sion and Peter's questions, you've kind of covered your, top 3 tips. Is that right, Gordon?
I'm going to just add one more. Yes, that's right. But I'm going to add one more. A lot of the times I see founders designing, their product, and one of their priorities is monetization. My tip would be do the monetization later or last. Focus on the product. Focus on designing and developing a product that customers actually want, because if you do have a product that people want, then you can add more. You can assess what brings value to the customers and what that value is worth to the customer, and turn that part of it into a monetization part. One more tip that I wanted to also share is a lot of the times I see founders wanting to build a lot of value into the first version, and then basically, and they still haven't worked out, how they're going to be making money from this particular platform. One of the tip is, if you gave everything out in the first version for free, it's very hard to turn around and try to put a subscription or paywall for features that customers are already getting for free. So recommendation would be, if you are launching a first version that's free, keep it nice and simple, keep that as a base. Then second version, any additional features or additional value adds you add to this particular platform, then put that behind a paywall so you don't, anger any potential users.
Yeah, great. Thanks for those tips, Gordon, and thanks everyone for joining. If anyone's got any additional questions, feel free to send them to myself or another PM, and we can, ask Gordon for you. But that marks the end of our session, as we've gone a few minutes over. Thanks so much for staying on, everyone, and for Gordon for sharing your story, the mistakes you've made, the things you've learned, and providing those very useful tips.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, and nice to meet everybody. And if anyone has any questions, more than welcome to reach out to me. Just a FYI, I'm not always on LinkedIn because I get spammed really hard on LinkedIn. So I don't look at it all the time. But if anyone wants to chat, you're more than welcome to speak to one of the product managers at Hyper, and they could do a proper introduction. And I'm more than happy to provide a helping hand and share more experiences.
Yeah, thanks so much, Gordon, and thanks everyone. Have a nice day, everyone.
See ya.
Bye.